Welcome to Wisdom Wednesday for September 14th. Our passage for today is James 1:13 through 15. Let no one say when he is tempted, I am being tempted by God. For God cannot be tempted with evil, and he himself tempts no one. But each person is tempted when he is lured and enticed by his own desire. Then desire, when it is conceived, gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is fully grown, brings forth death. Now, verse 13, when it says that God himself tempts no one, we do remember that God does test his own children to reveal the condition of their hearts. For example, Abraham with his son Isaac in Genesis 22:1, God tested Abraham and revealed his faithfulness in that key test. However, God does not entice people to sin. And I love how one commentator describes it, quote, temptation is an impulse to sin, and since God is not susceptible to any such desire for evil, he cannot be seen as desiring evil to be brought about in man, end quote. I think that's a helpful, that really captures the grasp, the gist of verse 13. Verse 14, but each person is tempted when he is lured and enticed by his own desire. And this key term, desire, epithumia in the Greek, refers to any craving or longing or strong desire, a lust, and not just for sex, but anything that your body desires and craves strongly. So then, James places complete responsibility for temptation and sin squarely on the shoulders of the individual. It is a person's own lusts and strong desires that lure and entice him to sin. The Greek verb for he is lured, exelko, actually means to drag away. So then the image that James seems to be presenting here is the imagery of bait on a fisherman's hook that is intended to lure fish into biting. And once a fish bites on that bait, he is dragged away forcefully, never to return. And this imagery then recalls, for those familiar with Proverbs 7, this actually frightening picture that the sage presents in Proverbs 7:22, describing the seductress who is luring people to commit sin with her. In Proverbs 7:22, all at once he follows her as an ox goes to the slaughter, or as a stag is caught fast, till an arrow pierces its liver as a bird rushes into a snare. He does not know that it will cost him his life. And so the imagery in James 1:14 of this fish possibly biting onto a bait and being dragged away forever, never ever to return, is actually very frightening, and it's intended to scare and warn. And I think that is in the back of James's mind. Our Proverbs 7:22 and 23, that frightful imagery of an animal being captured, never to return, to be captured for its own destruction. That scary, frightening imagery in Proverbs 7:22 to 23 is in the back of James's mind as he pens James 1:14. Verse 15, then desire, when it is conceived, gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is fully grown, brings forth death. This evocative imagery of desire as a seductress luring the believer into an adulterous union that brings death is reminiscent, again, of the role played by the forbidden woman or adulteress in Proverbs 5-9. The woman folly who leads her guests into the depths of Sheol, Proverbs 9:18, is contrasted with Lady Wisdom who gives life to those who embrace her, Proverbs 8:35. Similarly, again, James contrasts the death that unrestrained desire and lust brings, verse 15, with the crown of life for those who love God by loving his commandments in James 1:12. And I want to point out this imagery of progression in these verbs here, when it has conceived, when it has fully grown. And I think that progressional language there, it is James uses that to convince us that if we do not quickly and forcefully control and stop our lusts, they will lead to sin. And if we do not confess and forsake sin, it will lead to death and judgment. This graphic and attention-getting imagery is intended to stop sinners in their tracks and force them to overcome their lusts. And so, brothers and sisters, as we are tested to see if we'll remain faithful to the Word of God, and as James exhorts us to persevere through these testings, may we be reminded of the wisdom to be decisive and strong and clear and forceful when dealing with our lusts, the lusts of our flesh, to be quick to stop and forcefully control and turn away from before it progresses into death and judgment. So I pray, brothers and sisters, that is an encouragement to us, that it's a great reminder to deal with sin and lusts forcefully and strongly, and pray that we can live that wisdom out for the rest of this week. Thank you, and have a wonderful rest of the week.